If you want a case study in how to make everyone angry at once, look no further than the BBC's handling of the Bob Vylan's Glastonbury set. The punk rap duo, known for their furious politicised performances, led the West Holt stage in a chant of death, death to the IDF. The BBC streamed it live. Viewers complained, and now the corporation's executive complaints unit has ruled, well, something that sounds like both an exoneration and an admission of guilt at the same time, depending on which paragraph you quote. On page 1, the ECU says the chant breached harm and offence standards. It was anti-Semitic in tone. It humiliated a real individual record boss by calling him an effing Zionist, and it clearly offended the Jewish community. Tim Davie, the BBC Director General, calls airing it a very significant mistake. Yet turn the page and the same report insists it did not breach the rules on incitement to crime. Why? Because the unit argues in the context of a performance at a music festival, such slogans are an invitation to endorse an attitude rather than a call to commit violence. Death to the IDF, they say, was aimed at an institution, not individuals. The IDF is not defined by ethnicity or religion. Cue outrage. Danny Cohen, once the BBC's television boss, calls this a woefully inadequate response and the most serious breach of editorial standards in recent memory. Jewish groups ask how chanting death about an army composed overwhelmingly of Jews is not incitement, and meanwhile Free Expression advocates warning that treating angry art as hate speech risks policing culture itself. So why is this so awkward? The BBC's double blind. It must balance editorial freedom for artists with the legal test for incitement. The law is intentionally high bar. It punishes clear specific calls to imminent violence. Death to the IDF is vile, but probably fails the direct and likely test. The ECU reminds us Glastonbury isn't Newsnight. Our audiences expect opinionated and even offensive lyrics, and if the BBC applied news impartiality rules to live music, it would kill spontaneity and probably stop covering Glastonbury altogether. The BBC accepts it should have cut the feed or bleeped the chant, and Tim Davie has promised tighter risk assessment and fewer live high-risk sets in future. But harm and offence is a softer standard. It means you upset and demeaned, not you incited murder. But when you place this call against Lucy Connolly's or against Greg Lenehan's, I'm afraid it doesn't really work, does it? There's a sort of there's a two-tier standard. And the case lands in the fierce debate about the censorship of rap and political music. Campaigners like Art Not Evidence point out that UK prosecutors already misuse lyrics in trials. Drill and grime artists are surveyed. Now a black punk band is in the dock. Yet there's also genuine fear among Jews of casual eliminationist rhetoric disguised or dressed as art. When slogans like "From the River to the Sea" and "Death to the IDF" meet a surge in anti-Semitic attacks, dismissal as mere attitude feels tone deaf. When you have to go to shul and there's a policeman guarding the synagogue entrance, that doesn't feel to me like these sort of chants had no impact. So, did the BBC do well or do badly? Well, it was legally cautious. Well, yes, it resisted stretching incitement to cover speech that didn't quite meet the criminal bar. That's important for artistic freedom. Is it editorially smart? Well, hardly. Risk assessment failed. The feed should have been cut. Is it morally convincing? Well, not to many. Splitting hairs between Zionists and Jews and calling anti-Semitism a harm but not a crime leaves the BBC looking evasive. I entirely agree that we have to make a distinction between the Israeli government, which is pursuing a vicious revenge and a horrible siege, a murderous siege of Gaza, and Judaism, which is not a vicious religion at all, and more than that, I think one has to make a distinction between Israel and the Netanyahu government. But the BBC is trying to avoid all responsibility. It's a judgment that tries to be principled but ends up pleasing nobody. Too weak for those demanding zero toleration of anti-Semitism. Too censorious for those defending protest art. Only the BBC could anger both Jewish leaders and free speech advocates at the same time while trying to hold the middle ground. It's the broadcasting equivalent of trying to pogo on a tightrope. And the corporation promises not to repeat the error, but also not to stop showing edgy music. Well, good luck with that one. If the aim was to clarify the rules, this ruling has done the opposite. It has shown that in Britain's culture wars, the BBC is still our national Rorschach test. You know that extraordinary image of an ink blot. Everyone sees exactly what they most fear, and that's the BBC.